A warning before you watch the video, there may be minor spoilers both in footage and in commentary, as I am going to be talking a lot about my experiences with Color Splash. So I just finished Color Splash, and Color Splash is not a bad game, but it sort of wound up embodying a lot of Nintendo's strange identity issues. It has a story that feels like it's more quirky one-liners than substance, and it has a lot of unintuitive misuse of the gamepad as an unfortunate end-of-life product. As an adventure, Color Splash has pretty good pacing, and some unique, well-thought-out puzzles, and a couple of levels that may actually be the best part of Paper Mario as a whole. The concept for the story is almost banal in how cliche it is. Although we've come to expect there's going to be several story MacGuffins that pave the way to the end, I found this one to be surprisingly toothless. A life-giving fountain breaks, and then the reins get handed off to Mario and Huey to go and rescue the paint stars. The villains of the story, Bowser and the returning Koopalings, exist rather hands-off. And while this allows for a sort of renaissance of the quirky and bizarre writing that previous Paper Mario entries were known for, the narrative lacks escalation, and the stakes the narrative tries to place never really rise above a whimper. What Color Splash does is try to obscure story beats by just kind of leading you everywhere with a limited sense of open-worldness, though after each stretch is completed, it feels very paint by numbers. And this is especially true of the end of the game, which feels anticlimactically short on both length and challenge. In addition to those complaints, the Koopalings, who are again emphasized almost exclusively as little more than a recurring mechanic, sort of encompass what feels like Nintendo's growing issues with trying to create a homogenized identity, possibly for the purposes of having a more marketable visual language, or simply just trying to create a more established recurring cast from more nostalgic games. Because of this, they feel a little shoehorned in due to how they're tucked away from most of the game and story. Morton bumbles through a keep, Iggy, Wendy, and Ludwig pop up basically at chapter's end, already in possession of the paint star, and you don't know you're interacting with Larry until it's too late to matter. This isn't a severe complaint, but it does feel like there's a handful of missed opportunities. And since they exist in a way that is so reserved from the narrative, it's difficult for there to feel like there's any villainous presence like in Paper Mario 64. What it also lacks is the driving sense of mystery like what Thousand Year Door had that made its plot so compelling. Not only that, but the Koopalings are the direct source of another frustration, which is using the returning Thing cards from Sticker Star to again gatekeep stages of boss battles. It's actually impossible to beat most bosses holding onto a Paint Star MacGuffin without finding the right thing, and well yes, like Sticker Star, you're required to use things to progress in the open world. They require less investment both in time or money, as not having the correct thing in a fight means you have to run away or game over, which means you have to give up the cards used to reach that point in the fight, or the time you spent until game over. This puts pressure on players to not use things until necessary, and personally I never found out what most things did in combat, until I encountered a replica of said thing for fear of not having the right thing at the right time. This also leads us into the other major issue with Color Splash, which is combat. While it manages to bring itself one rung up from Sticker Star's incentive void turn-based battles, it's still a massive chore. Combat operates by selecting multiple cards and then swiping up to the TV, which sounds nice in theory, but it does get old really fast. And the menu takes forever to navigate, and it all requires tractive input on the gamepad, until you go into the options and enable a control scheme that doesn't intertwine with the touch inputs at all, so it's a mystery as to why it was disabled in the first place. But there's no indication of these alternative inputs, so you have to solve this by mashing around on the gamepad, and they just don't make a lick of sense. Up is accept, A is paint, B being back is the only sensible one. Also, you can't use these inputs when you're outside of combat, so it makes the whole implementation feel slipshod. It's kind of sad to say, but Sticker Star actually managed to get it right when dealing with massive inventories by simplifying it into pages. And when the combat isn't taking too long to navigate, it's usually muzzling itself with its own difficulty curve. Most of the fights in Color Splash can be completed in a turn, and difficulty only cranks up a couple notches around the 5th chapter or so, but it never evolves into something threatening. Even most of the bosses, once disarmed through use of the correct thing, are comically weak, and mostly only take a few more turns and barely deal more damage than a group of normal enemies. Even fights that seem intended to provide a challenge usually can be done in by abusing Battle Spin, which is rife with thing replicas that are pitifully easy to get at 10 coins a pop, just simply by counting cards. In fact, Battle Spin breaks combat so much by handing out pre-painted cards at such a low price that I barely felt inclined to participate in the game's economy at all. Also, enemy cards, which drop randomly from defeated enemies that let you summon that enemy in a fight, are the most questionably useful because they run from all of the major bosses in the game. In a roughly 28-hour blind playthrough, I visited the card shop maybe around 4 to 5 times, and basically never repurchased think cards for the express purpose of using them again in combat. In fact, most of the push and pull in terms of economy comes from a few very specific cards, which eat up a lot of paint to use in battle, or a few instances where you have to spend thousands of coins to fix a mistake in order to progress. There's one egregious example that ties to a fail state. That's a fancy word for game over. Where you stumble into the traditional game show that shows up in most Paper Mario games, and you either have to A, have more than half the cards in a randomized set to succeed, or B, buy them from an NPC that asks you to give up 30 card slots with no real indication as to what they're used for. Failing to have either game overs you, and then you've got to go back and either try again, wasting about 5 minutes each time, or just purchase the cards and put up with it. And then it turns out that you have to pay money and complete the entire quiz, including the bonus round that game overs you for one goof. Whoops. And these time-wasting fail states are commonplace. Most of the time you're forced to go into them suddenly and blindly, and instead of offering another outcome of the situation, they typically just game over you and force you to repeat the past few minutes. Some of these will take multiple attempts for typical players, and they get dull and frustrating pretty quickly, especially the ones that force you to rewatch cutscenes. Okay, that's a lot of complaining. The game isn't all bad. Despite my narrative complaints, there's actually a lot of really entertaining sub-stories in each major stretch of Color Splash. The Haunted Inn and exploring the islands with a bunch of bizarro worlds were some of my personal favorites. Each setting it has is really unique and colorful, and the textured papercraft environments really pop. Color Splash is definitely one of the best looking Wii-u games, and also probably one of the funniest. Even despite being a little contemporary with its humor, Color Splash has a lot of laugh-out-loud moments. And progression in the game does feel nice. Being able to take out weaker enemies without combat is a good boon, and using multiple cards per turn in battle actually works pretty well for strategically planning when you do need it. And the few unique random encounters in the game that require you to mix up your strategy are fun when they're not showing you what more the game could have been. The map screen, which I know a lot of people lauded as breaking up the opportunity for a more wholesome world, does solve a lot of the backtracking issues which have existed in previous entries in the series. It does suck a little bit for the few levels that require you to just walk to the end again and grab a different colored paint star instead of offering a different unique path, but ultimately I think it's a positive way of handling the traveling. Lastly, the way Color Splash does puzzles with the use of things and cutout, which requires players to use perspective and spatial reasoning to create paths to otherwise unreachable goals, does put an interesting spin on mechanics we've seen before. So, bottom line, is Color Splash worth it? Well, I think if you don't mind the pitiful difficulty and input problems, there's definitely some substance there. Unfortunately, Color Splash feels really unpolished. There's almost no difficulty curve, and many of the game's features feel half-baked. Die-hard Paper Mario fans will probably find this game better than Sticker Star, but far less enticing than Paper Mario or Thousand Year Door. And I suspect the story gamers will find it less substantive than even Super Paper Mario. So I suppose, try it if you're on the fence. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you'll mind the flaws way less than I did. Hi, I'm SunnySatellites, and thank you for watching this mess. I haven't written anything in a while, so I hope you'll pardon my dust while I settle back into my writing style, and this is the first in a series of, I guess, sort of gaming adventure vlogs, and I'm looking to do more in the future, so I hope you'll join me. Please don't hesitate to leave feedback if you feel like it, as I'm sort of de-rusting my editing skills, and I'm always looking for ways to improve. And thanks again for watching, and peace out.